that Goldman Sachs was in conflict with its own clients' interests, which is totally in conflict with the company's motto or byword that we always put our clients first. Of course, Goldman had a big problem. They had to get out of all these securities, and maybe they also saw some opportunities while they were doing it.
Let's turn to another clip from yesterday's hearing. Among the Goldman bankers to testify was Fabrice Touré, a 31-year-old vice president who helped create and sell a mortgage investment that figures in a suit filed this month by the SEC that accuses Goldman of defrauding investors. The transaction was called Abacus 2007 AC1.
The AC1 transaction was not designed to fail. AC and IKB were two of the most important clients to my desk. Moreover, the securities referenced in the transaction did not underperform the other securities of that ratings class and vintage. In fact, all those securities performed poorly because the subprime mortgage market suffered a broad collapse. Goldman Sachs also had no economic motive to design the AC1 transaction to fail. Quite the contrary, we held long exposure in the transaction, just like ACA and just like IKB.
Fabrice Touré, a lot of these emails that they were reading from him were emails he wrote to his girlfriend. Greg Gordon, explain what he's talking about.
Well, in the case of the Abacus deal that is the subject of the suit, Fabrice Touré put that deal together, and he did it at the request of a long-time Goldman client, Paulson and Company, which is a big hedge fund. And Paulson became known as one of the companies that made the most money out of the subprime crash and the housing market crash because it bet short. It bet against the housing mortgage securities that were all the rage at the time. And what happened here in this Abacus deal, of course, is that Paulson was allowed to help select the securities that would be part of the bet. And other investors were allegedly not told that Paulson was going to go short. Paulson was in communication with the outfit that was selecting the various securities known as the collateral for the deal, and there's going to be a he said she said at the end here, I think, because Goldman is now stating, as are people from Paulson, stating that the investors on the other side were told about Paulson's role, and the evidence suggests, or the allegations from the SEC suggest that the other side, the company that was putting the collateral together and wound up taking a huge bet on that deal, did not know.
Well, we're also joined by Rob Johnson, a former economist at the Senate Banking Committee. Rob, welcome to Democracy Now! Again. Could you talk to us about how this hearing and the investigations into Goldman Sachs are affecting the battles over financial regulation in the Senate?
Yeah, we're conducting a purity ritual right now. Politicians in both parties are trying to distance from Wall Street because the public has been waiting for a year and a half for meaningful legislation, and they fear that these people in both parties have been, we say, in bed with the financiers. Bismarck used to say you shouldn't ever see legislation or sausage made. Now we can add finance to that. There are three things that you shouldn't see the inside of. Regardless of what's legal, you could take this to a small school child and they say, that's just wrong. And what we're finding out, I mean, Greg's done great work. Where were the SEC and the Fed? These things, I mean, if they were serious about this, and I believe Senator Levin is, they would have unleashed Bill Black and Elliot Spitzer a year ago on this case. And Goldman's right. At every one of these banks, the same kind of activities are going on. We just need all of their emails and a lot of time and some staffing to get this done. But what they're trying to do is, Senator Dodd overstated his bill. It will end too big to fail. Even Ted Kaufman, a Democrat, objected to that. We come back to the other side, and Mitch McConnell says these guys are in bed with Wall Street. At that point, the White House pulled the trigger on a file that they had about Goldman Sachs to show they're not in bed with Wall Street. They're taking on Goldman Sachs, and now they're the scapegoat. And everybody's trying to increase the public's, what you might call, confidence that the legislature really means business. What the public has to do is keep the floodlights on, not only through Senate passage, but when we go to the conference, when they try to do things with the lobbyists in the dark again.
Oh, that's what I want to ask you about, because while all the attention is on Goldman Sachs, there are reports that the frenzy of lobbyists that are trying to, on behalf of different sectors of the American economy that are trying to get carve-outs in the financial legislation to protect them from new regulatory requirements. Could you talk about some of these interests and what are they trying to save from this new financial regulation bill?
First of all, you have 6 banks, which includes Goldman Sachs, that own about 97% of the market making in derivatives. They make about $35 billion a year. If you did proper reform that made the system safer, they'd lose 20 to 30% of that profit. They're spending over $400 million a year lobbying to stop these improvements. And, how I say, it is something the American people should be very, very angry about. But you see particular cases. The front page of the Wall Street Journal yesterday showed how Warren Buffett, who's called these weapons of mass destruction, has Ben Nelson of Nebraska, who's the Democrat that voted against cloture on Monday, lobbying for a special exemption for Warren Buffett because of collateral requirements. Now, Mr. Buffett's sensible. He's got a great deal of financial power. On the other hand, do you want to create exemptions for a whole bunch of people? Then you essentially don't have rules. He should abide by those rules. Money in politics means he might not have to.
Republicans have blocked the Democratic bill twice this week. Yes. What's going to happen? And Obama's out on the campaign trail saying they won't even talk about it.
The problem right now is that both teams are spending tremendous amount of money on pollsters, and they're trying to find out which message wins. Does the Republican message that this is a bad bill and doesn't protect you win? And there's some reason to believe that the bill's not strong enough. It could certainly be improved a great deal.
Exactly how should it be strengthened?
It should close all kinds of loopholes related to derivatives end users and certain contract swaps, foreign exchange, that are exempted from the derivatives regulation. It should be much tougher. They should raise the salaries of bank examiners and bank supervisors. They should increase the numbers. They should invest in systems so they have real-time data. We're basically in the middle of a big sociological change right now about finance. And what we need is these people to submit to being governed, and the systems need to be built so that they are governed.
But to ask about that whole issue of derivatives again, it turns out that it's not just banks that were involved in derivatives, but you have many other industries that produce products, but then invest their money in derivatives as a way to sort of insure against possible losses in their industries. Now, I mean, whether it's the automobile industry or agricultural producers,
sure, jet fuel, all those kinds of things.
What is this doing to? What is this derivatives market doing to the actual functioning of the economy? That so many of these industries are concerned about being able to preserve their ability to invest in derivatives.
Well, my sense is that a market that what you might call provides insurance does do some social good. When a market turns into a wild casino, it blows things all over the map. Look at last year, 2009, oil prices. Excuse me, it was 2008. Oil prices went from $38 to $147 and back. Nothing happened in the world that warranted that, but it dislocated so many industries. Their cost structures were blown off their moorings. You need proper, transparent structures for derivatives so that the insurance market can work, but the momentum of the speculative market is somewhat diminished.
We're going to continue on the economy with a new film out that's called Plunder. Rob Johnson, I want to thank you very much for being with us. He's former economist at the Senate Banking Committee, director now of the Economic Policy Initiative at the Roosevelt Institute. And thanks very much to Greg Gordon, who is with us in Washington.